Longsword beyond basics, strategy, adaptation and dueling mindset. Hi everyone, I hope you're doing well. As you may have noticed, I have been playing with the Longsword for quite a while now. It's about to hit level 200, so I wanted to share some insights I have gained along the way. This won't be one of those short, bite-sized pill videos that aim to go viral with oversimplified "you shall win" advice. Instead, this will be a more in-depth contemplative guide. Some might find it long or even a boring, but I hope you'll find it meaningful. There are already plenty of basic and intermediate tips out there in YouTube, so rather than repeating them, I'll try to share my own personal insights via experience. These include both beginner-friendly fundamentals and more advanced concepts. Lots of experienced players may have aware of these, but some are reluctant to share on YouTube. Whether you're new or experienced, I believe you may find something useful here. Keep in mind, this video is mainly focused on dueling. Tips for team objective are quite different and will need a separate video as well. Keep in mind that I am also not a native speaker, so I just struggle at pronunciation and sometimes talking. First, know your weapon. First and foremost, understand your own weapon. The longsword is one of the most balanced weapons in the game. It doesn't excel in any specific area like others do. It has decent damage but not high. It's relatively fast but not as fast as one-handed weapons or war club. It's neither short nor long, despite the name. Well, this creates a unique situation. Depending on how you play, this neutrality can either work for you or against you. Longsword demands adaptability. You need to adjust your strategy depending on your opponent and their weapon. While this is true for all weapons to some degree, with the longsword the pressure is greater and the punishment for failing to adapt is harsher. Because the longsword is so balanced, mistakes can cost you more. You may find yourself thinking, am I just bad at this? But often the truth is you're not playing badly, you're playing the wrong way. It's not a lack of skill, but a lack of adaptation. But where is its advantage? It's in the middle of everything. You can change your play style easier against different enemies. And the most rewarding gameplay of longsword is playing very fast and doing correct gamble based on memorization and observations. Because it is where it excels. If you won't play fast based on observation, gambles and fast feints, you better play another weapon because it will serve you better. Second, know your enemy and memorize their moves. I know this might sound like something out of Far Eastern philosophy, but it's true. You need to know your enemy first. 80% or even 90% of the player base usually play a single style in a single duel, which means they can't realize their mistakes in an ongoing fight and adapt accordingly to your playstyle. Well, for you this means if you play correctly, you can win against most of the player base. For example, does your enemy have a slow weapon like great sword or maul? Watch out for his feints, especially the heavy ones. Observe how fast he throws his feints and how often. Don't try to counter everything enemy throws at you in a row, especially their initial swings. Press your block and see if the enemy will do feint or a heavy feint without you countering their simple swings. If the enemy throws feints at you without you countering their simple swings or excels, then it means enemy aren't truly observing you but playing their own way instead. This is a weakness that can be exploited and used against. For example, try to throw a simple counter for their overhead, and if they turn it into another feint, don't follow it, but instead Axel strike against the player. Your swing will most likely hit first. So many players call this gamble, but it's actually a calculated risk, and basically everything in this game which will make you win is a calculated risk as well. A heavy feint thrown against a longsword enemy is also a risk because he may not follow your feint, but we don't call it gamble, so I suggest you to ignore complaints when people call you a gambler. Against the fast weapons though, like war club or spear or one-handed weapons, you can also even gamble them, but it's riskier and I don't suggest it unless you think a heavy feint is on the way or you're really desperate. Third, play fast. Throw fast exiles first to know your enemy. You need to learn and practice how to play fast. Longsword is a weapon which is faster than most of the two-handed weapons, so it favors fast-paced games, especially against two-handed players which has more counter window, damage, stamina damage than you. If you throw feint at them, they may simply hold their block and only counter your feint. If you want to win against good players, you need to make them to counter your axels first. They need to react instead of controlling the pace. Otherwise, chances of winning with a longsword against a very good two-handed player is low. Longsword has fast feints and low stamina damage. Players who know this usually play about countering the feints and don't bother with countering your axels. With a simple reason. Trying to counter a fast axel is risky, because after that first swing, a heavy feint or very fast feint may be coming. Longsword has the capacity to do a very fast feint in the right hands, or they can manipulate their swing to confuse you. You can throw a overhead, then press slash and turn right or left at 45 angle very fast. This way you give enemy a very little time to react. Or without the need of a fast feint, you can do a stab plus manipulated stab by you looking upwards, which looks like overhead for milliseconds. But it's actually a stab, and enemy already went for the overhead counter. So your enemies who knows how to play will try to avoid this, and they will try to counter it as least as possible of your axels. So observe and try not to throw a feint without enemy has countered one of your axels. If they counter early in the fight, it means they are guessing your axels and feints. By countering your axel and in the next strike, they may block and wait for a feint. A few fast axels will reveal what kind of countering style you're up against. There are few types of players when it comes to countering. First, there are those who never attempt counters and end up dropping their weapon. These are actually beginners or players that didn't learn how to counter. My recommendation is to use kicks or repeated axels to force them into dropping their weapon. Second type, the one who tries to counter literally everything regardless of your acts. This is one of the types who usually either have a slow weapon or an average experienced player who's trying to practice a lot of countering. Throw very fast feints, manipulated feints, and if he can counter that too, throw heavy feints instead. But don't forget to mix it with axels along the way. Predictability is fatal. Third type is, there are some people don't take risks against longsword and don't bother countering your axels unless they're low on stamina. These players usually play with a heavy mace, which make your stamina damage lower and they can keep blocking more with a fever counter. And bad thing is, you can't beat them either without their stamina getting low or using kicks. kicks to break their block or throw in risky gambles. Kicking is faster but riskier option. I suggest you to get really close to them and simply block one of their exiles and in report. Do an overhead and immediately turn it into a kick. If they take the kick, watch them if they start countering. If they still block, kick again until it doesn't work anymore. If they're quick enough and don't fall for the kick, then they must be a good player or so, and you need to lower their stamina. When you see that they're started to counter your exiles, then try to mix heavy feints and exiles. If you throw a heavy feint when they thought an exile was coming, you can pass their counter. Fourth type is the one who do make counters based on guessing. This is a high risk, more reward gameplay which both protects your health and stamina if done correctly. But at the same time, if you fail to guess correctly, both depletes stamina and health. If you can guess, read and memorize the enemy accordingly, you will succeed. I do play and counter similarly as well as this type of players. But it's not without its disadvantages and risks, much like everything else in the game. For example, throw an exile, he counters. Throw another exile, he still counters. And throw a heavy feint, he also counters. Well, that's the advantage of countering based on reading enemy and making assumptions. If you want to be a longsword main, you need to master this kind of countering type. But why? Because Longsword has a narrow counter window which will make you vulnerable for heavy feints and drags, so you can't go and counter feints easily. It also has a low stamina damage, means your enemy can counter less than you and have more stamina. Other countering types will put you in a disadvantaged position. You cannot wait to hold your block like other players, because if the enemy has a high stamina damage weapon like heavy mace, battle axe or messer, you will lose the stamina game. They will out-stamina you, especially vanguards who will laugh at your stamina after a couple of battle axe exiles. Longsword is risky, because it favors risky gameplay against good players. Using Longsword against good players, or even average players, is hard. They have more stamina damage, wider counter gap and health damage, considering they're using a non-one-handed weapon, of course. So, go on and try to counter everything, and then get punished with drag. Don't counter and watch your stamina being depleted. What to do? You need to read, guess, and memorize your opponent correctly. Always remember their last 3 moves and how often they throw simple heavy drags, heavy feints, etc. If you've seen 2 or 3 of exiles, either hold your block and wait if they're going to throw a feint, or play aggressive and just counter their first strike. The enemy is most likely going to have a feint or do a slow feint. Don't be afraid to be hit by a slight slice, because it's better than taking a heavy feint which can kill you with 2 strength. Main key is the moves of the opponent and applying correct solutions. Treat them as fast living puzzles. If they threw a heavy feint in the first 5 moves or so, they will probably send another one, but when is the right question. Some good opponents also know that you may don't follow their feint and throw a gamble, so they throw a move to counter this, a fast feint which will hit before your counter gamble hits him. Enemy throws a overhead and you counter overhead. Then enemy turns it into a fast slash and excelling towards you, and you have decided to gamble, so try to excel too. But you've been hit by his slash because it's reached you faster than your overhead. Some players do this fast feint by just muscle memory, but some do it by observational move against your counter gambles to avoid being gambled. The thing is, even fast feints can be gambled, unless the enemy has another longsword, war club or something faster than you. This is, I don't know what other people call, but I call it initiation gamble. This time, after countering 2 axels or so, or simply if you anticipate a feint, when it's your turn, throw an axel against the enemy by pressing crouch button. They should be blocking your attack, not countering it. This is the key. When they block, keep pressing the crouch button and look to the ground. Your sword must hit the ground fast, because when it does, your swing animation will immediately cease and then you can immediately recover your sword. After your sword hitting the ground, don't even look up. Keep looking to the ground and send another accelerated overhead as soon as possible. If the enemy does a feint, even a fast one, or does a heavy drag like a simple heavy overhead, your weapon will hit him first. This is a very good way to deal cheap damage against players who mix their strike. If you anticipate a feint, don't just stand and wait. Just go and knock on the enemy's door with gambles instead. Longsword doesn't reward stable gameplay against very good players with Messer or Heavy Mace or Battle Axe. If you want to play more steadily and less risks, you're better using those weapons because by the time you've taken Longsword in your hand, you are already accepted the risk. Another type of gamble which is riskier than others but something between counter gamble and initiative gamble and less used. Usually when it comes to countering simple swings, you need to wait until the enemy's weapon getting close to you. Because Longsword has a small counter window, and if enemy have a slower weapon like Messer, even a slightly light drag or delayed overhead can pass your counter window easily. But in this gamble, you won't be caring about timing at all, and you will start countering as soon as possible when you see a slightest swing animation has just started. Just match the swing type. For example, if enemy pressed overhead, immediately press counter overhead and go for an axel. You won't care about the timing at all, because you don't expect to counter their swings already. This will look like as if it's a counter attempt by enemy, but it's actually not a counter at all. It's a hidden gamble in disguise, looks as if it's a counter. Use this only if you anticipate a feint. With this way, you can even hit earlier than their fast feint, which actually they will be thinking they are doing a move to punish your counter gamble. But since you have swung your sword even earlier than standard counter gamble and don't have the means even to counter a simple swing, this punishes their thinking. So it does serve the same purpose of initial gamble as I have mentioned earlier. But this time it's not visible in the action until you do it. So the enemy will think it as if you're playing normal and safe, which you actually didn't. But one very important note. To do this gamble, the enemy must have a slower weapon like a Messer or Greatsword, Maul or so. Your reaction speed and axel is also important, because if enemy decides a fast feint you will be literally hitting him by tiny milliseconds. So basically, you have three types of gamble. One, counter gamble, which counters standard swings and punish heavy feints or slow light feints based on weapon and how fast you have acted, but got punished by fast feints. Second one, initiative gambling. When you think the enemy will throw a fast feint or a simple heavy drag like heavy plus overhead, you will hit the enemy earlier, but get punished by a simple stupid swing. All enemy have to do is press mouse button once, so make sure you made the correct decision. And third gamble, which serves the same purpose an initiation gamble but looks like as if you're countering, so your enemy won't feel alarmed. That being said though, it's riskier than other gamble types. If the enemy don't have a slow weapon like Messer or Great Sword, it doesn't work it. I neglected to mention for opposing faster weapons. Try to gamble them less, or none unless they throw heavy feints a lot or in a pattern which can be readable. Instead, try to lower their stamina and see if they're going to start countering. When they do, throw a heavy feint. You can also throw 2 heavy feints in a row if you have stamina and enemy counters based on assumptions a lot. If they gamble your heavy feints, then this time use lots of axles and heavy feints to punish their gambles. You can also throw some simple overhead without a feint or a simple heavy stab without a feint. Because gamblers have conditioned themselves to not counter the second swing. When they say alright, this turn is a gamble turn, they have conditioned themselves to only throw a simple counter mostly. So with this way, a heavy, simple stab both surpasses their simple counter and still lands earlier their gamble. And don't forget to use your special attack if they're very low on stamina. It will make them drop their weapon with a big stamina damage. 5. How to pass heavy feints, light feints with Longsword. We all talked about playing fast, reading and correct gambling. But in order for your feints to pass, you need to know and do couple of things. First, if the enemy don't counter your axles, don't feint until he does. If the enemy has a weapon which has a wider counter gap, don't try to go overhead plus overhead, because this is the fastest and weakest feint of Longsword, even though it hits 70 points and this one hard to pass through counter window unless enemy accepts a very fast overhead feint or you have dragged the overhead from right to left, etc. If the enemy has another longsword or something fast, you can use overhead plus heavy overhead. But watch out if they gamble. If they do gamble you, use repeated of axles and fast feints and give the impression to your enemy as if you're going to make a heavy feint, but do a fast one instead. The other things, slash plus heavy slash or stab plus heavy stab feints are easier to pass. And if enemy throws an axle and you riposte as stab, not always slash or overhead. Because your stabs have the most stamina damage as 17, unlike other types like overhead has 15 or slash has 12. Take notice Longsword stab stamina damage is more than heavy mace's slash stamina damage, and the same as Messer's slash stamina damage. So you will either force your enemy to counter your stabs or make him lose as much as more stamina. You can also go for a fast overhead riposte after those stab ripostes to make yourself less predictable. When you anticipate that the enemy will decide to counter your stab, you can go for a heavy stab or heavy feint stab. The easiest heavy feint to pass through enemies' counter window is the stab plus heavy stab, because its animation is slower than heavy feints and the other weapons. Even the slow one's counter gap is smaller for stab plus stab animation. Also, you can easily start heavy stab by looking at enemy, then immediately turn your aim slightly left or right, like 30-degree angle or so, then immediately aim to the enemy for stabbing again. This way, heavies can pass much easier, or even the light stabs can pass this way by starting while looking at the enemy, moving aim out of the enemy, and then looking at the enemy right after it lands. This is more effective if enemy also have a weapon which doesn't have a wide countering window. With this way, enemy will try to counter, but his weapon won't catch your stab in time, so his counter will fail. That being said, it's hard to pass heavy feints with longsword, playing against someone with slower weapon, because your enemy will try to counter less times than you, and when he does, he will have a easier timing to counter it. You need to mix your very fast feints with slow and heavy ones. With this way, the enemy will be forced to react to your fast feints immediately. And even though they have a wide counter gap, they will misuse it by pressing very early, and you'll have your own chance to pass your feints now. But this will only happen when enemy starts countering you from the start of your attack. Because of this reason, without you forcing your enemy to counter your exiles first, you won't be able to pass your feints through. Well, this was all from me. I hope you liked it despite the accent. There may also things that I have forgotten to say, so if there is more things, you can say on the comments as well. I just wanted to share my experiences and lessons so far I have learned. I do know many of the experienced players out there know these tips and insights already. But there are also lots of average, non-try-hard players out there which have no idea about these strategy. If you're someone who did not know these, let me remind you. Even though you know you have the knowledge, it requires lots of practice to apply it in the heat of a duel. Because knowing is one thing and applying is another. Stay safe, love you all, have fun, see you on the next video.